What's up, guys? Colton Richardson here. I actually just had my paralegal come in right before we started this, and she shut the door real fast. She's like, "What did I just walk into?" But welcome back. Alex Murdaugh has still been on trial, day 15, and the state is still putting on evidence. And so we're gonna jump right in and see what's been going on today. I've been keeping up with it. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'd love to address them in the next video if I can. So let's jump right in. Uh-oh. Here we go. They're going to bring the jury in.
Testified about.
Whoops. He was.
Thank you. Good morning.
This is a cross.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Day number 15.
Day
State's
15.
case. The last objection was sustained.
3 weeks.
And ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you, when I sustain an objection, that means you're to disregard the question and any response. You may proceed.
And that is true. Whenever an objection happens, the jury is supposed to completely disregard everything that's been said. But as we say in the legal community, how can you unring a bell once you've heard something? How can you unhear it? And so that's what he means by that. And that is the difficult thing, is it's very hard to admonish a jury to ignore something that they've already heard. But they do it anyways.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. May it please the court. Mr. Chensley, good morning.
Good morning.
Just to kind of reset the table from where we left off, you had testified about pursuing the case against the defendant over the boat wreck, correct?
Correct.
And you had communicated to the defense that the defendant was going to have to pay personally, correct?
Correct.
Not just the insurance.
Correct.
And you had been told that the defendant was broke, correct?
That's correct.
And you had filed a motion to compel. Had you filed a motion to compel, states 402, seeking to identify any bank accounts that he had?
In October of 2020.
So the state put him on there to show that the boat accident that his son was involved in has caused great financial consequences that he might suffer from. And so what they did was they sent a discovery request to Alex Murdaugh and his defense attorney to find out what exactly his assets are, find out how much money he has, because the plaintiff who was deceased is seeking to get money from Alex individually and not just his homeowner's policy. Whenever there's a situation like a boat accident, usually you can recover from a boating insurance policy, but also a homeowner's policy. In this situation, in that case, they were saying that they were going to go above and beyond all the insurance policies and go after him individually and try to get some of his assets. That can be vacation homes, that can be bank accounts, numerous cars, whatever it be. So that's why they sent a discovery request to him. So that's what he's talking about right here.
Could I have the elbow, please? And the screen. David, if you can help. All right. I think one of the things that you had also testified to is that just generally COVID had kind of slowed things down in the court system.
Ultimately, yes.
And then you had some health issues that you were dealing with as well. Is that correct?
At some point, yes.
At some point in time, did a hearing in the boat case that would include a hearing on this motion to compel that's on the screen get scheduled?
It did.
And when did it initially get scheduled?
My recollection is it was set for May the 30th, 2021.
All right, and let me show you an exhibit real quick. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 404 and see if you recognize this document.
I do.
All right, and what is that?
That is a communication about the hearing. It's actually about a status conference about the hearing that's going to be on May the 30th.
Okay. All right, and what was the date of that status conference going to be?
May the 7th,
All right.
2021.
All right, and then look at the subject line on that and just take a look at that real quick.
Motions hearing May the 11th.
Yeah. Was that the date or was it May 30th for the motions hearing? To your recollection.
To my recollection, it's May the 30th.
All right. But this email is related to that particular hearing, is that correct?
It's related to the hearing on my motion to compel and some other hearings, yes.
All right. At this point, Your Honor, I move to admit States 404, I believe, without additional objection.
No additional
Submitted.
And is that the particular email we were just discussing?
It is. And you're correct, the hearing was May the 11th.
May the 11th?
Yeah.
Okay. Haven't seen that. That refreshes your recollection.
Yes.
We'll show you now what's been marked as States 405. And have to take a look at that and see if you recognize this.
What is it? And those are foundation questions AS asked. What is this? Do you recognize it? The true and accurate copy of it?
I do.
All right. Tell me what this is, please.
It's an email from Judge Hall, who had been assigned the case about the hearing. John Tiller, who was Alec's lawyer in the boat crash case, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer about the same time, just before I found out I had cancer. And so he had a chemotherapy treatment that was going to run long the day of the hearing. He didn't always know when his treatments would be, but about a week before he would know. And so the hearing needed to be rescheduled to accommodate John's treatment.
All right. And just initially, when that request was made, what was the judge in that case's response?
The hearing would go forward as scheduled, and one of Alec's other lawyers could attend.
All right. So initially, the judge denied that continuous request. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what happened after that?
They
That
usually
ultimately
grant
resulted in it being continued.
I sent an email. John Tiller was my friend, and I didn't object to continuing it. And then the judge had a status conference, and at that point,
Especially if there's
we
no objection.
continued the hearing until June the 10th.
That's so weird.
Had in the course of this litigation, given that we were coming out of COVID, had the judge in that particular case been relatively aggressive in wanting to move this case forward to your assessment?
The judge knew that I was in Florida receiving treatment and was accommodating that. No, he wasn't being aggressive at that time. It was when I was ready, and
Most lawyers
so I was
and
back and we were
judges are
And that's what led to this initial hearing. Is that correct?
Correct.
understandable.
But ultimately, you agreed to
Investigation.
let this thing be continued, correct?
ready. I did.
All right. Your Honor, this time I'd offer State 405 into evidence.
Yeah.
Submitted.
Judges and lawyers are understandable, especially in that
Down at the
situation.
bottom of this email chain, what's the date on that? Can you read there on your screen? I need to bring it back to you.
May 5th, 2021.
And that's communication from whom?
That's from John Tiller to Judge Hall.
All right.
And that's relaying the need for the postponement for the chemotherapy treatment.
All right. And then there were the communications from you related to that. Is that correct? Well, let me go right here. This is the response right there. Is that correct from Judge Hall?
That's the initial response, that he intended to go forward with the hearing as scheduled, and that Mr. Condon from the same firm could handle it.
Interesting. If there are multiple lawyers on the case, then sometimes they go ahead and go forward with the hearings. But most cases, especially if someone's treating for cancer, like, relax. No problem, Lizette. I appreciate you saying that. I really like that picture. What kind of dog is it? But yeah, this trial is complex. There's so many moving parts. And the state's really trying
Now
to
what's
build
been marked
motive.
as States 406 and see if you recognize this particular document.
I do.
All right. And what is this? Tell the jury what this is, please.
That's an email from John Tiller. So after the email that's on the screen saying I intend to go forward, John Tiller sent another email explaining a little more detail what's going on, and that he had, I believe it says he had spoken to me and I had agreed. They were my motions. There were some other motions, but when it's your motion, you can agree to continue it if a party wants it continued and you don't object. And so
100%.
that's what that's doing, trying to get the judge to not go forward with the May the 11th date.
100%.
All right, Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 406 in the evidence.
Basset hound. I like it.
All right, and the date on that particular email is?
May the 6th, 2021.
Did the judge ultimately, though, based on this series of emails, granted the continuance on this motions hearing, correct?
Well, he gave us a status conference in which we did by video, and ultimately he agreed.
Okay. And what day was the motions hearing that included the motion to compel rescheduled for?
June 10th, 2021.
Quite a while ago.
Going back to States 402, one of the matters that was on the table to be heard would have been your attempt to get compelled responses to this interrogatory from the defendant, correct?
That's correct.
Seeking a
So what he did in this case is, in a civil case, you send discovery responses. And so this is the defense lawyer or the plaintiff's lawyer for the deceased. And Alex Murdaugh is the defendant in a civil case because he was the parents of his son who caused a boat accident. And so what he did, the defense lawyer, was he sent a discovery request requesting certain information, like we talked about at the beginning of the video, financial information. And Alex Murdaugh and his lawyer did not give that information. And so what they did, what the plaintiff lawyer right here did, I think his name's Philip. We'll say Philip because I think that's right. Philip. Philip filed what's called a motion to compel. So when someone doesn't give you documents or information in a civil trial, you have to file what's called a motion to compel and ask the judge to force the other side to give you that information. So
identification of his bank accounts.
That's correct.
that's what he was doing here.
What day of the week? June
They're
the
gonna
10th,
have a
2021 would have been?
I believe it's a Thursday.
How'd you hear about the murder of Maggie and Paul?
I got a phone call sometime in the middle of the night, 11:30, after my recollection.
That was on June 7th, 2021,
That's right.
into June 8th, 2021.
I think I heard it's still June 7th when I hear about it, but yeah.
On June 8th, 2021, did you have any conversations with any of the lawyers involved in the boat case or any communications?
I believe so. I think that it was more of there wasn't a whole lot of consideration to be given to the fact that the hearing wasn't going to go forward. It was sort of shock and horror of what had happened, and nobody really knew what to do in the moment.
Of course, that hearing's not going forward after this.
It did not.
It does remind me of OJ. Different but similar. I agree with that. 100%. Let's see and the parties of a lawsuit, they rarely come to a hearing on motion to compel. So that didn't really matter.
We'll show you what's been marked as States 407. and see if you recognize that particular document.
I do. This is an email from Judge Hall's law clerk. Judge Hall's over the boat crash case to me and the lawyer for Parker's, as well as about the fact that the hearing's not going forward.
All right, this time I'd offer states 407.
The hearing was canceled to be rescheduled.
What's the date of that email?
June 8th, 2021,
At what time?
4:24 p.m. I think there's an email from John Tiller that precedes this one that morning, but
Right. But ultimately, there were communications the following day that obviously we're not going forward with this hearing on the motion to compel, correct?
yeah, pretty much immediately.
And
Makes
at
sense.
that period of time, was there any date set in the wake of all of this for it to be reheard?
There was not.
Sometimes before they reschedule or cancel a hearing,
Um,
they pick another date.
In the wake of the murders, did you generally understand or have an idea of at least what had happened to Maggie and Paul, how they had been killed?
I did.
Just from media reports and the rest of it?
That's right.
And did that have any effect, that tragedy of their deaths, did that have any effect on your assessment of the boat case and how everything fit together, if things were how they initially appeared?
It would have affected. I mean, yes, it did, and it would have ended the case
It would have ended the case against who?
against Alex Murdaugh.
And explain that to the jury. Why? What had changed after this terrible tragedy?
Well, when you have a civil case, nice people get good verdicts. Okay, just generally speaking.
That's true.
Yes, sir. Nice people get good verdicts. You really have to motivate.
I'm gonna stop there because I'm a plaintiff lawyer, and so I have clients that are injured. Nice clients get good verdicts. If you're not a nice client, the insurance company or the defendants take that into consideration. And honestly, they won't offer you as much, and they really get to know who you are through a deposition. So that's very important. Obviously, he's exactly right. This is what he does as well.
A jury to want to help somebody in a civil case. And so if you compared, say, Attila the Hun with some sweet grandmother, who gets a better result? It's the sweet grandmother.
Yep.
If Alec is the victim of a vigilante, nobody's going to hold him accountable. Doesn't make any difference what he did or how clearly what he did contributed. The case would be over against Alec. And so initially, it could have been over. It appeared that it was going to be over against Alec because I had other defendants. I had Parker's convenience store that clearly violated its rules. And so you wouldn't want a very sympathetic person in your case when you have somebody who clearly violated the rules and caused this tragedy. So it would have been over against him.
So I don't know too much about the underlying boat case that he's talking about, but it sounds like there was a convenience store maybe on the water where they were, or maybe they went to a convenience store and then got on the boat, but probably bought alcohol and might have been underage or something of that nature, or bought more than they should have or were allowed to, something like that, where the convenience store violated their rules or even the laws. And so that's why they would be held liable. And obviously, in most situations, most people don't have as much money as Alex Murdaugh. And so going after a business, they have more proceeds because they make money every single day. So
the sympathies of the case had changed if Alec had truly been, his family had been the victim of some vigilante or something like that.
The sympathies would have changed if that had been true.
And assessing those sympathies and those emotions in a case like this is what you do as a plaintiff's lawyer. Is that correct?
It's what we try to do.
And it's what Alec Murdaugh used to do as well when he was a plaintiff's lawyer.
I think he was good at reading people and knowing what made them tick.
Thank you, Mr. Tinsley. Nothing further at this time. Please answer any questions.
short
if Mr.
cross.
May have.
Thank you.
very
Mr.
short.
Barber.
Cross. But it might not be enough. Sometimes the best cross can be no cross, no questions at all.
Good morning, Mr.
Oh, that's prosecution.
Morning.
Almost
Maybe
just start asking a couple of questions that I
It's
think
cross.
are just some things that we could agree on
It's going to be
before
short.
maybe getting to some other things. Was there any life insurance for Maggie or Paul?
I don't believe there was any life insurance on anybody, including Alec.
Probably self-insured.
And if this motion's hearing, which was not just the motion to compel, it was other motions, correct? On June the 10th.
Yeah, there were some other motions.
And if that hearing had gone forward, at least for the motion to compel, this would have been another step in a process, right? In other words, I believe it was your previous testimony. I think it's fair to say that there wouldn't have been an explosion on June the 10th, that this would have been another step, but it wasn't the end point.
So what happened?
Is that correct, sir? Yes or no? Am I misstating your testimony?
So
Well,
So Philip is a lawyer right here. And so it'd be very interesting to be crossing another lawyer. That does not happen very often. And so that's what he's ultimately getting to do right here. That would be a fun situation to be in, honestly.
There
Well,
wouldn't have
so-
been an explosion on June the 10th.
You're jumping around, so it's hard for me to follow.
I apologize.
Well, if you let me finish.
No,
Your Honor, I would like to ask the witness to be allowed to finish his answer to one of those questions, and I object to the form of the question.
Pose one question.
yes, Your Honor. Did you previously testify, I think that it's fair to say there wouldn't have been an explosion on June the 10th?
I'm sorry,
Yes
you
or
were
no?
looking down. I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry, I was reading it. I think it's fair to say that there wouldn't have been an explosion on June the 10th. Did you testify, did those words come from that stand when you previously testified, yes or no?
I'm not trying to give you a hard time. You looked down again, and I could not understand what you said.
I
Was there an
I
explosion?
apologize for that. I'll hold it up. I'm just trying to read it accurately. I think it's fair to say that there wouldn't have been an explosion on June the 10th. Yes or no, is that your testimony previously? Just yes or no,
It's possible.
please.
You're trying to turn it into something it's not, but I probably said words to that effect.
Okay.
This is what I'm talking about, crossing a lawyer.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Oh,
And it
how about that cross? Like I said, sometimes the best cross is no cross at all or a short cross. So
Direct.
now the prosecutor gets an opportunity to redirect. So you go direct, cross, and then the prosecutor gets an opportunity to redirect their witness, and he can only ask questions based on within the scope of the last questioning. So whatever the defendant's crossed is. So really, that one question, we'll see if he has something.
You're asked about the motion to compel being another step in the process. Is that correct?
It was a way to put pressure on Alec.
But if after that hearing happens and an order granting a motion to compel have been issued, that starts a process that's going to run its course. Is that correct? If a order is, I'm sorry, I'll rephrase that.
And you can't lead your own witness.
If a order to compel is granted, tell us about the process that happens after that as it relates to your specific interrogatory we've talked about here today.
Sure. The process starts on Alec's side way before. If you look at those exhibits that they marked the email, you'll see Danny Henderson. Again, Danny Henderson was his personal lawyer. Danny Henderson is also a shareholder in the firm. Danny Henderson is reviewing every single document. That's how meticulous Danny Henderson is. He reviews all of the account information before I get it. And nobody knows better what Alec's making than Danny Henderson. I mean, you'll see all these checks going out and all these payments being made, and Danny Henderson would have known. So the explosion.
Object, Your Honor. Objection.
Basis for the objection.
Yeah, what's the
Foundation.
Response.
I heard someone say speculation.
Speaking of,
Speaking of response to the objection.
he has testified.
So normally whoever does the questioning, so in this case, the defense lawyer who did the cross-examination, he's the only one who can object and speak during the objection. And so sometimes you whisper, hey, Paul, do this or say this. So that's what someone was doing.
as to the fact of his interactions with that individual who actually brought him insurance documents to review. I think he has a basis to know.
Foundation and your response to the objection.
I believe he has sufficient foundation to address that from his personal knowledge, Your Honor.
Overrule the objection. You may answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. For instance, I had subpoenaed the phone records, not only Alex, his father's, but we also had John Marvin, Alex's brother's phone records. Danny reviewed those records for a long time before I could get my hands on them. Danny was involved in everything. He was at every hearing. He was at every deposition. He was intimately involved in every aspect of the case.
If an order to compel is issued, what was going to be your next step if you had an identification of accounts by the defendant?
Subpoena those accounts.
Yeah.
And if those accounts are subpoenaed, can potentially people move to quash those?
They could move to quash, but Danny Henderson would have looked at the documents in anticipation that I could get them.
I sustain the objection.
If motions to quash had been filed, though, you could have continued to seek that and there would have been further hearings. Is that correct?
I would have continued.
Objection to sustain, that's the leading.
What would have happened if motions to quash were filed as any subpoenas you issued to it for the specific information about the defendant's accounts?
I would have continued to push. We would have continued to argue about it.
Would have a process been put in motion, though, that was going to conclusion if an order had been issued on June 10th, 2021?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Nothing further.
It would also be very nice to have a lawyer.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Hopefully they'll know exactly where you're going.
The next witness.
And this should be the housekeeper.
May it please the court. Your Honor, this time the state of South Carolina calls Ms. Blanca Simpson.
Blanca Simpson. We're going to speed up a little bit before she gets up there. There she comes walking down the aisle. Unless you guys want it slow, just one speed to watch her walk. And let me know if you have any questions. Comment them. I'll try to get to all of them.
My name is Blanca Turubiate-Simpson, Turrubiate-Simpson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, this
Is
is
this difficult for you to be here today?
Yes, sir, it is.
intro questions. Kind of
Would
personalized.
you please tell the
witness.
ladies and gentlemen of this jury, Ms. Simpson, about yourself, where you're from, your family, if you want to, and just kind of what you've been doing in life leading up to today, generally, please?
Yes, sir. I'm originally from Brownsville, Texas. I joined the military at the age of 17.
Wow.
I was in
Respect.
Norfolk, Virginia for almost 9.5 years. I was stationed on the USS Puget Sound, USS Shenandoah, Naval Air Station Oceana right before I left.
What'd you do there?
Heavy equipment operator.
Okay.
And my husband was also a heavy equipment operator. We were both in the same field. We decided that the military was just not going to be good environment for raising children. So we made a decision, instead of moving to Texas, we moved to South Carolina, where he was from.
For those who just joined us, this is
And,
the housekeeper of the Murdaughs.
We have 5 children, 34, 31, 23, 21, and a 17-year-old. They're all been raised down here in South Carolina.
Lost count. Is that 6?
Any of them still at home?
Yes, sir, 17-year-old.
Where was your husband from? You said he moved back home. Where was he from?
My husband's originally from Gifford, South Carolina.
Say it again.
Gifford, South
Gifford.
Carolina.
Okay. And what does he do?
He's a police officer for Hampton.
when you came to South Carolina, you never been here before, correct?
No, sir.
Okay. What did you do when you got here besides the hardest job in the world, being a mom and raising kids? What else did you do?
Nice.
When we moved here, we had enough leave built that we didn't have to work for almost 2 months.
That's nice.
So I went to, after about a week, I kind of got bored because I'm used to having hands-on doing something. So I went to the local Piggly Wiggly store in town and I asked I didn't know he was the owner at the time. I realized he was the owner after, if I could get a job because I was bored. And
How many kids do you have?
I have 5.
Okay.
But I only had the 2 oldest ones
Okay.
at that time. And so he said the only job he had was a stalker. And I actually had no idea what that meant because I had just graduated high school and went in the military, so I didn't know. But I told him I would take it as long as it would get me out of the house for a little bit. So I took that job, and then within a week, I got a call from another job that I had put in where it was brazing or welding at Scotsman, which is in Allendale County. And I figured, well, it offers benefits and it would be better transition for the kids, dental, that sort of thing. So I went there. After about 2 weeks, another job called me and had better dental medical benefits for my kids.
Dang.
So that was the first time I went to work for the South Carolina Department of Corrections. I opened up Ridgeland Correctional Institution. I was the first class to graduate from Ridgeland Correctional Institution. I worked my way up from correctional officer to sergeant. I managed the outside details and the road crew on the interstate. Also a crew that would go out to Hunting Island for maintenance to assist with the park rangers.
Real fast, we'll address Lizette's question. Have they questioned any other people who could have motives to see this guy in a true Greek tragedy? So they actually really haven't questioned any other individuals who might have motive. They didn't really have any suspects except Alex, and they kind of hit on that early on in the trial, which was really interesting, that he was the only suspect that they really ever considered. So very interesting. Thank you for that question, though.
In 2001, I was offered a job at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I accepted the job. So I left.
Got a lot of jobs.
Ridgeland Correctional Institution, went to work for FCI Estill, Federal Correctional Institution, Estill, South Carolina, where I stayed until 2007. My job, basically, I started back from the bottom as a correctional officer, and before my year's up, I got promoted to the Special Investigative Support to Tech Office.
Impressive.
Where I was responsible for managing, producing reports, weekly reports, and also profiling the Hispanic gangs, because there was not a lot of staff members that were bilingual. So my job basically became profiling, interviewing, and associating members, the inmate population with gangs.
And how long did you do that?
From 2001 to 2007.
Not that anybody cares, so is that when I first met you?
Yes, sir.
Did you help me arrange a meeting with a prisoner I need to interview?
Yes, sir.
Interesting. So there I had a
And why did you leave that job?
prior
Just-
history.
When you're the only, one of the only ones in the office that's bilingual, and you're constantly getting called out for different incidents dealing with a Hispanic population that had grown up quite a bit from the time I got there, and still having to do your daily duties in the office and nobody's helping you, you tend to burn out pretty quick. So
So if an
I
incident,
made a decision to leave.
so if an incident happened when they needed a translator,
I
Your
was
phone
called,
got
I had to
Speed
stop
was
what I was
like
doing and respond to whatever incident dealing with the Hispanic inmates.
1.5 speed.
what did you do after that?
I went into real estate for a little bit, which was not so good because that's when the market crashed.
And
Please
again, for
interest me
for the
long.
jury's edification, what year is this when you quit the prison?
2007
And you're living where?
in Brunson.
I'm sorry.
Brunson?
So how long did you stay in real estate?
Maybe about a year and a half.
Your family's grown at this point, I presume?
Yes, sir.
And did there come a point that you met the defendant, Alex Murdaugh?
There we
Yes,
go.
sir.
Can you tell them how that happened? Tell the ladies and gentlemen how that transpired.
Now we
When
get to meet.
I first moved to Gifford with my husband, like I said, I was bored, so I went to work at the grocery store. At the grocery store, and during the time that I moved, there was not a lot of Hispanic families living in that area. It has since grown in the years. I met a lady who I befriended. She was Hispanic, and we started talking because she was the only other Hispanic person that I had actually seen in the area. So we started talking back and forth, and it was nice to speak in your native tongue with somebody. Her son had an accident at the school on his way after school, walking to the car, and he had gotten hurt. One of the ladies that worked at the school had recommended that she use an attorney from Walterboro. And a couple of months had gone by, and I noticed that she was under a lot of stress. And as I talked to her, she said, "I just have to get all these documents. I don't understand." She spoke English, but it was very broken English. So she was having a difficult time explaining what she needed for the attorney. So I told her, I said, "I'm going to find you an attorney. I'll look around." I said, "And we'll go ahead and fire that attorney and hire you a new one."
It's very nice of her.
And because we didn't want the statute of limitations to run out on her case. So
You
at
can't
that
fire your
point,
lawyer.
I started looking around, and I happened to walk into the law firm. And it was the old offices where I met Alex.
Just walked in, and that's where you met the defendant, Alex Murdaugh.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you were trying to assist this individual who was having trouble communicating with her prior attorney. Don't mention whoever that attorney was, but you helped her get a new attorney.
Yes, sir.
Did you help with that case, that particular case with this friend?
Yes, sir. He told me he would take the case.
Who is he? Who's
Alex told me he would take the case as long as I translated and helped him with the details. Because he didn't have anybody in the office that was bilingual, and I agreed.
That was nice of her to help.
You were a
out.
hot commodity, weren't you? I mean, there was a need for translator.
Yes, sir.
Interesting question.
So you helped with that case.
Yes, sir. I did.
Did you assist in other cases with
Yes, sir, I
Alex
did. At times, Alec would call me and ask him if I could assist in translating, or when there were accidents and the folks were injured, and if they did not speak the English language, he would ask me to translate.
and were you getting paid for this service?
Yes, sir. It wasn't a set fee. It was just depending on the case, whatever I did, whether it was to get them signed up with a law firm, basically, or if I had any type of, in the Hispanic community, when you are in trouble or you're in need of something, and a lot of times those accidents, when they happen in the area, they are not from here. The language barrier is a big thing for them. So my instinct was more to make sure that they were well accommodated and whatever they needed. So sometimes he would reimburse me for my out-of-pocket whenever I helped the individuals, who were in the accident.
You should be compensating her for helping.
And that went on for a period of time when you were assisting either Alex Murdaugh or the law firm. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At least give her a
Did
gift.
that change into a caregiver, if you will, or respectfully, I don't mean housekeeper or whatever term you'd like to call it, for Maggie Murdaugh?
Yes, sir. Alex had called me and said Maggie was looking for a person to help her in the home. And at that point, real estate wasn't really doing much for me. And so I couldn't find anybody. I had asked around. And at that point, I told him, I said, well, I'll help her. And he was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll help her." I said, "It's no big deal to me. It's honest work." So
Super nice.
I said that I would help her.
You were clearly qualified.
Yes, sir.
So what did you start doing for
I
either the
would-
Murdaughs or Maggie Murdaugh?
I started helping the other ladies in the house with the cleaning, with running errands, running to the bank for her, whatever she needed me to do.
When did that start, Ms. Blanca?
In 2007.
And were the two young children, or the two children, Paul and Buster Murdaugh, were they younger? Obviously, they were younger. When you-
Yes, sir, they were young.
And would you have interaction with them and/or Alex Murdaugh during this time period?
Yes, sir.
How often were you working for the Murdaughs?
At that point, it was maybe every other day, depending on how often she needed me.
And where was that? Where specifically were you working? Where was their
At the
house?
house on Holly Street in Hampton.
How long did that go on before you stopped and tell them why you stopped?
I worked there with them on and off, like I said, not on and off, I shouldn't say that. Every 2 to 3 days, or it wasn't a daily thing at that point. Then I did go probably about maybe, I can't recall, it was a few months later or a couple weeks later. There was an incident at the house, and somebody had tried to burn the house. So that's when I actually went and started helping her more full-time, because she had to go through a lot of the damages and all that. I helped her document a lot of whatever damages were done from the diesel and stuff that was spilled all throughout the house
Let's get a
by the
question.
individual.
And maybe I wasn't clear in my question. Did there come a point where you had some health issues?
Yes, sir. At one point, I suffered a stroke and I had to stop working and go through rehab for a while.
And what year was that? 17 and 18, maybe?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So prior to your stroke and you had to go to rehab, how long did you work for the Murdaughs?
That was a few years by then.
How long were you out after you had your stroke, Blanca?
Let me know if you guys have any questions.
Maybe almost 4 years.
Did there come a point where you went back and started working with Alex, with the Murdaugh family?
Yes, sir.
And tell these folks when that was.
Shortly after the boating accident, I reached out to.
And they're really trying so many different cases in this one trial, because they keep talking about the boating accident and some indictments, and really they talk a lot about the boating accident. And so they're really trying a case within a case, which makes it even more difficult in this situation, because you have to not only bring evidence in on this case, but also the boat case. And they're doing that because they want to show that Alex Murdaugh had motive to murder his wife and one of his children. So that's probably the reason why this is an extremely long trial, because we're already on week 3. So for those that just joined us, this is the housekeeper. And so we'll keep on going with it after Lizette said, interesting because there are so many people around whom he took money and lifestyles were damaged. That is very true. It seems like there were quite a few people who might have motive to get back at Alex or kill some of his loved ones, but they really didn't look into anyone else. So we'll jump right back in. This is the housekeeper of the Murdaughs.
To Alex and Maggie, and I told them if they needed anything that they could call on me. And at that point, Maggie said that she would like for me to come back if I was able to. So I told her I would. At that point, I was feeling better, so I told her that I would go back. And once I went back, it was like I actually never left.
I was just informed the stroke was in 2015, not 2017. I
Yes, sir.
apologize.
Yes, sir.
So after your recovery, you started working and actually called them, the Murdaugh family, and said, if y'all need anything.
If y'all need anything, you know, I'm here.
And I don't think anybody will dispute that was in February of 2019.
Yes, sir.
Time period?
Yes, sir.
So when you went back to work with the family after the boating accident, tell these folks, what were your duties then? What was your job?
I started right back at the same thing. I was helping with the cleaning. I was helping running errands. I would cash checks. I would, and what I say by cashing checks for Maggie, sometimes she didn't have time or she was busy doing other things. So she would send me to the bank to cash checks
I wonder if those are the checks that we discussed the other
to
day.
pay the people that she had working around the house. The main,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
yes, sir. The maintenance line, you know, that sort of thing, whatever she was doing around the house.
And where were they living, the Murdaugh family, at this point in 2019?
Both places,
Okay, tell the folks where both places.
Moselle and Hampton.
So you're working at both residences?
Yes, sir, both.
And did there come a time
Nice.
where they moved exclusively for the primary residence to, well, where was their primary residence?
Their primary residence was Holly Street, and once they sold the house, they moved straight into Moselle, full-time.
We hadn't heard much about Maggie, and I'm limited what I can say in a murder case, but did y'all get fairly close?
Yes, sir.
And when you had quit working for her and you had your stroke, did you ever see her during that time period when you weren't working for her?
Yes, sir. Maggie would, I would see her in town, and she would often signal me to pull over. So we just used to stop sometimes and just talk and see how things were going at the local CVS,
Just to catch up?
just to catch up and see how everybody was doing.
Interesting.
And prior, when you were working and after, would you, and I'm not asking you to say what, but y'all got close and would talk personal things?
Yes, sir.
Uh-oh. What's going to come out? Who else is on the edge of their seat? Back to his notes. A lot of lawyers don't stay behind the podium to ask questions.
I'd like for you to go back in your mind now and take this jury back to June 7th, 2021.
Yes, sir.
You were working there for the Murdaughs then?
Yes, sir.
That's a Monday. Do we all know that, June 7th?
Yes, sir.
When had you worked prior to that? At
At-
the Moselle property for them?
Friday.
And at that point, had you seen, what family members did you see at Moselle on Friday, which would have been the June 4th of 2021? Do you remember?
Paul?
And what was your interaction with Paul that day?
Paul walked through the door, his usual self. I was walking out of the laundry room, coming into the kitchen, and Paul came in the front door, and he was holding a laundry basket full of clothes. And as he was approaching me, he saw me, and he said, "What's up, Miss B?" And I just looked at him. I said, "Boy," I said, "if you got all them dirty clothes and you want me to take care of that," I said, "I'm getting ready to leave." He's like, "Oh, come on, Miss B, you can help me out." He said, "I need them for the weekend." He said, I said, "Well, just pull a couple of them out, what you need, and I'll take care of it." And
Look at
I
Alex.
ended up staying late to make sure that he had his clothing ready for the weekend.
Look at Alex, how he's responding.
So did you wash the clothes for the entire family? Was that part of your?
Yes, sir, I did.
But Blanca seems super nice.
And did Paul leave that Friday?
Yeah, I saw him leave. I don't know whether he was actually gone for the weekend or if he was still.
you ever see him again?
I'm with you, Lizette. It's a long
Yes.
intro. I mean, you want to tell a story, but you need to speed it up a little bit. I'm 100%
Did
with
you have regular hours in June of 2021 that you worked at Moselle for the Murdaugh family?
They weren't really set hours. Maggie was pretty, she was just easygoing. If I had stuff to do, if I had stuff to take care of, she wasn't really too keen on any specific hours. So, you know, if I had a doctor's appointment or if I had anything, she'd be like, okay, no, her main comment to me always was no worries,
No worries.
no worries.
Well, June 7th specifically, were you scheduled to work at Moselle?
Yes, sir.
And did you have contact with Miss Maggie Murdaugh sometime prior to getting to Moselle that morning?
Yes, sir.
And I think it's in evidence, but tell these folks what contact you had with her.
She texted me and asked me if I could stop at the grocery store on my way to Moselle because Alex wanted some Capri Suns.
Wanted some what?
Capri Suns.
Okay.
And she said apple, and I believe she said pineapple first, and then they changed. She came back with another text and said, no, he wants orange. I believe that's what he said.
Does this really
That's what
matter?
the text said. I'm not.
And did you try to get some orange Capri Suns?
Yes.
Where'd you go?
I went to the Food Lion.
And were you successful in your search for
No.
orange Capri Suns?
No, sir.
I'll show you what's marked States 54, Blanca.
This guy behind
Excuse me,
Alex
Defendants
Murdaugh
54 for the record.
looks like Stan Lee. Maybe it's him.
Did you have any other texts with Miss Maggie before you got to Moselle?
Yes, Maggie told me she had to go to a doctor's appointment. And she said that in the text, Maggie said, Alec wants me to come home. And she said, and in a phone conversation, she told me, she said, I left some food in the refrigerator. Is there any way that you can cook? Paul likes the way you cook. So she said, because I don't think I'll be back in time. So I said, yeah, sure. I said, I'll do it. So it was nothing. I finished what I was doing, and then I started cooking, making sure the meal was ready for when Paul and they arrived at home. Well, that afternoon. And we had another conversation on the phone where she told me, she said, Alec wants me to come home. And she kind of sounded like she didn't want to come home. Because she really liked being at Edisto. And they had a lot of work that was going on, and she was trying to make sure everything was ready for the 4th of July gathering that she was planning. So she was very detail orientated, so she wanted everything perfect. So she was she sounded like she was a little disappointed. And then she said, well, Alec asked Paul to come home too, because he's got to fix the mess up out there that that CB had done.
At CB Road?
Yes, sir. And he said Alec had told Paul to come and fix it because they were planning on having a hunt that weekend. So he wanted everything ready and good to go.
So he'd asked Maggie to come, and then he had asked Alex to
It's
come.
weird that the
That's what
prosecutor.
Maggie,
Paul to come.
Paul,
Standing
that's what
over there.
Maggie told me over the phone.
And looking at Defendants 54, can you read that? Text?
He said, thank you. I'm waiting at doctor. Alex wants me to come home. I had to leave. door open at Edisto, but trust Mexicans to shut and lock for me. His dad is back in the hospital. The last doctor claims not cancer, it's pneumonia. And then she's got some emojis. She said, Alec is about to die. Hope he doesn't go down there to sleep. Needs to take care of himself as well.
And then she said, I trust the Mexicans to leave the door open. That didn't bother you.
No, sir.
Okay. When she said, I guess my question is, you said you didn't think she wanted to.
Mr. Meadows, you're standing in front of the jurors.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's where they standing over there to question.
When you had just testified, you didn't think she wanted to come home. Was work being done at Edisto?
And he's like trying to touch.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And
That's weird.
did she like being at Edisto?
Yes, sir, she did.
And
no,
when
I
would
don't.
she stay at Edisto?
Usually you don't touch the witness.
Any chance she had.
I don't know if there's a rule. It might be a local
Where was
rule,
a time of year that she liked being there more than other times?
but that's weird.
Yes, sir. Come around spring, summer, she preferred to be in Edisto.
It's just weird.
And I guess, was she at Edisto the night, Sunday night? Do you know? Where was she Sunday night?
I'm not sure.
Unless she knows.
She can answer if she knows.
I'm not sure.
Good objection. What was that? What was he doing? Yeah, it's.
Were you on
June
schedule
7th.
June 7th time-wise?
It's just weird.
Were you running late? Were you? What time were you supposed to be there?
I haven't seen.
I
it.
didn't have a set time to be there.
After you and Maggie talked and texted, did you go to Moselle?
Yes, I did.
And when you got there, was Maggie there?
No, sir. She had just left.
Was Paul there?
No.
Was defendant Alex Murdaugh there?
Yes, he was.
Okay. When you walked in the house, was he up?
No, sir. He was in bed.
Was in bed. Based on the time you spent there and your experience with the defendant Alex Murdaugh, was he a morning person?
No, sir.
No. How long were you there working before you saw Alex Murdaugh? That morning on June 7th of 21?
Probably a couple hours.
And can you tell these folks, did there come a point that morning where he left the house? Alex Murdaugh, did he leave and go to work or
Yes,
wherever?
he did.
Okay. And can you tell them what he was wearing, Alex Murdaugh,
It might
best
be
of your memory when he left Moselle?
hospitality.
He had a pair of khaki pants, greenish, I call it seafoam color, polo shirt.
It's amazing she
And he
remembers.
put a sports coat, a blue sports coat over it.
I can't remember what I
And he
wore.
put his shoes on, which were usually right there next to a dresser that they had right there in the living room area. That's where his shoes used to go right there. So he just used to kind of slide his shoes on his way out the door.
Do you remember what type of shoes he had on June 7th, 2021 when he left?
His regular work shoes, the brown, there was a pair of brown leather shoes.
Was it a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt he left on?
The polo's a short sleeve shirt.
Jeez.
And staying out of everybody's view, do you remember anything specifically about that shirt?
As he put his coat on, he was putting his shoes on and he was putting his coat on. And he was getting ready to walk out. He turned around and I said, Alec, I said, hold on a minute. I said, your collar's sticking up. So he turned around and I fixed his collar inside his jacket because one collar was sticking up.
So
on
you
his shirt.
actually helped, I'm sorry, but you helped move his
Yeah,
shirt?
yes, I did.
Oh my gosh.
And you said it was a
That's
long or
crazy.
short sleeve, I'm sorry.
What in the world?
That polo is a short sleeve,
And did it have buttons on part of it or do you know?
just from here to here.
And was it a blue blazer?
It
Put on
was,
top of it.
it was a dark color.
He put a tie on. He
Excuse
didn't have a
me?
tie with that on.
No,
I
sir.
just,
I can't believe she remembers what he's wearing. And why did he touch her again? And then he's like, "Oh, sorry."
now, Miss Maggie had asked you to fix dinner for the family. Did you do that?
I did.
Can you tell them what you made?
She called it steak burger, but it's cube steak and gravy, some white rice and some green beans.
I don't remember what I ate last
You
week.
good cook, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Did you see or talk to Maggie ever
What second
again
that was it?
after this text or this phone call?
Before I left Moselle, I texted her and I said, the dinner was on the, I believe I texted to the effect that I left dinner on the stove for them. And, that I can't really remember the text, but I did text her and let her know that the dinner was ready
She doesn't
and that I
remember.
was leaving.
And you said one of her phrases she used is "no worries." Had she said that to you that day?
Yes.
When was that? It doesn't matter.
I can't remember.
You got a family of your own, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you, when you left Moselle, what did you do?
Pick up my son at school.
And your husband's working,
Yes,
law
sir.
enforcement?
Yes, sir.
And when you got home that night, did anybody call you that night?
No,
When did you hear about the murder at Moselle of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh?
the next morning when I was getting ready to go out there.
The next morning.
Yes, sir.
How did you hear?
Alex called me.
And what did he tell you? He didn't call, he called you the next morning.
He called me early the next morning.
And what did he say to you?
He sounded shaky on the phone. You could tell he was,
That's good for
his
her.
voice sounded really shaky.
That's good for her.
And he said, B, they're gone. They're gone. And that my initial thought was, did she go back to Eddystone? That thought didn't cross my mind that he meant that they were dead at that time.
You just didn't comprehend.
No,
So a lot of times, like when they're shaky, when they're talking on the phone, that could be seen as good for the prosecution or good for the defense. Good for the prosecution, as in he's trying to cover something up and he's nervous about what's going to happen next. Good for the defense, as in he lost his wife and he lost one of his children. And Lizette said, if this guy couldn't do laundry or food, how did he commit the perfect crime? That is a great question, and that's a good argument that I think the defense has been making in this. But I think that's all the time I got for today. Blanca seemed very kind in testimony, and there's some other good points that she brought up during the testimony. But if you want to go watch it, we're at 2:15. But I want to say thank you guys for joining me tonight, and we'll get back on next week. And I hope you all can join us then. So until then, have a great weekend.